Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Career Bootcamp 2025, where you will unlock the secrets of building a successful career. Please note that this session will be offered in English and French simultaneously. To view the French session, please return to the Zoom lobby and join the French session. Afin de visionner la session en français, veuillez retourner au lobby et cliquer sur le lien pour la session française. So I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm located in unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanagahaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters in which we gather. Tiohtià:ke, Montreal is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. I also encourage, as I know that there are a lot of people on this call connecting from all across the country, so I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you're on as well. And you can do so with something that was just dropped by my team in the chat. All right, so Career Bootcamp, just a little bit of an overview. Career Bootcamp is the largest conference in the GC, and the only goal is to support you in your career journey. We would like to acknowledge that this is a difficult time for job search and career growth in the federal public service, and that some of what is being shared throughout Career Bootcamp may not resonate with your current situation, but that said, we trust that you will find guidance provided to be important, informative, and transferable throughout your career journey. As we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote your questions that you like the most by clicking the thumbs up button, and this will upvote the most popular questions, which we'll be able to start with. As with all FYN sessions, this session will be recorded, so you can go back and check out the recordings and the insights at a later date. So don't worry if you don't take all your notes today, you can always go back and reference it later. So in addition to the recordings on our YouTube channel, we are also offering another way to learn this year, a podcast series of the Career Bootcamp sessions. So after the CBC, the podcasts will be made available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, which is very exciting. We would also like to note that the PowerPoint presentations for each session is included on our wiki page so that you can feel free to follow along at your own rate and to improve your learning experience. Also, all the resources shared that we will touch on during the session will be added to the wiki page as well under resources. More information on this will be shared momentarily and currently in the chat. All right. So hello, everyone. I started with some housekeeping, but to introduce myself, my name is Antonia Macris, and I will be the moderator, your moderator for this session today. To introduce myself, I am the Manager of Corporate Learning at Environment and Climate Change Canada. I have joined the public service a few years now. I have a background in environmental assessment, communications, and educational technology. You could read more about my bio and the speakers as well in the deck provided. And I'm also the co-chair of the National Youth Network within our department. Now, before we get started, we have a couple quick polling questions. This is not a test, don't worry, and it is not mandatory, but given that today's subject is tough talks for career growth and mastering difficult conversations, we'll start off with a quick question. The first being, how comfortable do you feel initiating a difficult conversation at work? So we have very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, neutral. Take your time and please fill it out. And the second question, what's the biggest challenge you face when having tough workplace conversations? So we have finding the right words to say, managing emotions during the discussion, worrying about how others will react, balancing professionalism with honesty, and initiating the conversation in the first place. Let's see. All right, let's see some of the results. Thank you all for submitting. A lot of you have. So for how comfortable do we feel, the majority of us in this virtual room, initiating difficult conversations at work. Somewhat is the majority, somewhat uncomfortable. We also have high, somewhat comfortable. So there does seem to be a mix. So, well, that's something we're going to get into today with our speakers to dive into how to approach different situations and then you make feelings of uncomfort become comfortable when we speak with our managers. And what's the biggest challenge you face when having tough conversations? Okay, so some of these results are also split, the highest being balancing professionalism with honesty, and the rest are pretty even. So we will touch on a lot of these topics with our speakers today, and you will also have an opportunity to ask any questions during the Q&A period. So thank you so much for engaging in that poll. I would now like to introduce our panelists for today. We are fortunate to have with us three incredible professionals. First, Samantha Harris. Samantha Harris, or Sam for short, is a communications advisor at the Canadian Border Services Agency. She's also the co-chair of the youth network at CBSA, and will be able to share with us the perspective of a newer public servant, similar to myself. You could feel free to also read her bio and follow along with the deck from the wiki page. Our next panelist is Anu Shukla-Jones. Anu Shukla-Jones joined Biocan RX as the manager of stakeholder relations and knowledge mobilization in 2024 through the Government of Canada's Interchange Canada program, and will be able to share with us a breadth of experiences and knowledge across the public service. Thank you, Anu, for being here. And lastly, but not least, we have with us Dr. Kati Kamkar, who is a renowned clinical psychologist, appointed executive position with the Federal Associate Organizational Ombudsperson with PSPC since 2023, and the associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto as well. So Dr. Ketsi, thank you for being here, who will be able to share with us as an expert on the topic and in the field. All right. So without further ado, we'll pass it over to our panelists to get us started on the topics. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Antonia. As Antonia mentioned, my name is Sam, and I'm happy to be here with you all today to talk about tough conversations at work, difficult conversations for career growth and how you can navigate that. So based on the poll and the discussion we just had, I'm sure many of you in this room have had that uncomfortable feeling before a confrontation or a difficult conversation where it's like you have that gut feeling and you're nervous. But we're here to talk about that today and how you can navigate that, whether it's a conversation with your manager, addressing conflict with a colleague, or breaking difficult news to a stakeholder. We're going to talk about why effective communication can help you navigate those situations and build trust, resolve issues, and grow professionally. This can be very anxiety inducing, but often that's where a lot of the growth happens. So I will pass it over to Anu to cap.
Thanks a lot, Sam, and thanks everyone for having me today. It's really nice to see, 822 of you on the call. I hope this is going to be worthwhile. Next slide, please. So conversations with your manager, we've all got one. I have spent about almost 20 years in the federal public service and have had a whole lot of managers. And so there's been a range of conversations that we have with them, including performance appraisals, learning and development, and career goals. And there's a different amount of comfort that probably we each have with these in speaking with our manager. But the best way to approach some of these topics is by first being really aware of where you're at and what you have in mind. In terms of performance appraisals, this might look like really thinking about how you're going to communicate what the situation is, what a behavior that has impacted a behavior that you've observed, and how that impacted you so that you can help clarify feedback, perhaps in a performance discussion that doesn't sit well with you. You can also ask questions such as, can you share specific examples? Now, of course, performance appraisals and having that conversation with your manager really does depend on the relationship that you have with your manager. So what happens before the conversation is just as important as what happens in it. In terms of learning and development conversations, try to be open to your manager's feedback, and when you're asking for learning and development opportunities, think about what a win-win scenario looks like. Why is it good for you? And why is it good for your team? I would also say extend that to consider what it means for your organization. And consider that learning opportunities don't just have to look like you going to get a learning opportunity, but it can also look like your team organizing something on behalf of the organization for others. And that also can exercise some additional skills. So think about how that feedback can help you. In terms of having conversations about career goals, this can be really great. And it's really ideal to have a management relationship where you can have this discussion anytime. But much earlier than before you actually leave for an opportunity. Earlier in my career, I had the honor of having a great conversation with Mina Ballantyne, who is a president of Wage. And she said, you know what, there is a place for everyone in the government of Canada. So what doesn't work for you in that position, it might work for somebody else somewhere. So leaving doesn't mean that someone's losing. It actually means that someone else may have that opportunity to really flourish, and so will you. Next slide, please. Some of the more difficult conversations that you might have with a manager can be of the interpersonal variety. And so these can be it may be between perhaps you and a colleague. That's the example that the YPN has given us. It may be about priority setting and communication between you and your manager. And that's something that really has to be navigated quite delicately. But you should always try and resolve issues at the lowest level. So if it's between you and a colleague, try and work it between them. But if you do have to escalate matters, do go to your manager for serious issues such as harassment and discrimination. And finally, when looking at exit interviews, when you leave for a new opportunity, it can look like a lot of things. It can look like because it's the end of an assignment, it's the end of a secondment, and perhaps there are some reorganization of priorities or financial considerations. Either way, having an open and honest conversation with your manager is really helpful. Now, if you're leaving a toxic situation, then that is something if you're living a toxic situation, that's something that's going to be a little bit more difficult to handle, but that's something we can talk about in the Q&A session, I hope. Next slide, and back over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Anu. Yeah, so a lot of these, processes and techniques that you can use when talking to your manager, you can also apply to conversations with colleagues. So even though it might not be the same in terms of difference in seniority necessarily, it's still important to show up and talk to your colleagues with respect and understanding that it's not just what you say but it's also how you say it. So trying to avoid escalating situations and setting clear expectations when working together collaboratively in a team and with your colleagues is very important as well. So the example we have on the screen here is group projects. But I want to direct you to the productive conversation process graph that we have here. So in that graph, it starts by identifying asking questions. So with the example of the group projects, you could say something like, can we all clarify our tasks before starting the project? This is a great way to prevent misunderstandings along the way and ensuring everyone's on the right path and setting some clear expectations from the get-go. On the other hand, it's important to listen. I'm sure we've all been in situations where you're really excited or really passionate about a project, and you have all these really passionate ideas of what you bring to the table and your vision. But it's important to respect others and understand that your colleagues are probably coming to the table with the same mindset. And in saying that, that can really be a strength, and respecting people's different communication styles and learning styles, also respecting diversity and just being very mindful of how you're communicating with others, making sure you're listening to what they have to say as well, which sort of leads us to the next step in this process, which is alignment. But I've been sort of referring to this as adaptation as well, and being open to adapt and collaborate with your colleagues is super important in a team environment. So channeling that passion and drive that you have and working together with your colleagues, communicating with them, setting clear expectations, and really leaning into the differences. That can be, everyone brings a unique perspective to the table. And if you're open and able to listen and ask the right questions, that's key in terms of it can even make a better product at the end of the day. One more thing I just want to mention is the team norms. So if you have a new employee joining your team, maybe it might be good to just set some expectations right off the bat, saying, our team values punctuality for meetings. Does that work for you? So ultimately, you're setting some expectations, you're listening and being open for collaboration, respecting diversity and people's differences amongst your team. Everyone has a different skill set, and just being mindful of what you bring and what other people can bring to the table. And next slide, please. So for this, resolving conflicts with colleagues, again, we're really focusing on open communication. How can you be productive and get your point across in a respectful way, especially if you do come across maybe a personal difference or some you're butting heads with a colleague in a group project. If we go back to that, example of the group project, it's important to try not to try to do things and communicate in a way that you're not escalating the situation. So for example, that might look like scheduling regular check-ins to address concerns early. Saying something like, I notice this timeline feels a bit tight. Should we adjust our deadlines? Rather than, panicking and maybe calling them on Teams and saying, this is too tight, this is never going to work, and panicking. It's good to just sort of take a minute, chat it out. And if it does come down to some conflict at the end of the day, focus on the shared goals of the project and try to really hone in on that so you can avoid defensive behavior. Saying something like, let's prioritize the client's needs and adjust as a team. Again, that's the collaborative focus. It's not me versus you. This is us coming together and really trying to promote a culture of transparency where people are comfortable providing feedback and their concerns. So putting out what you want to receive is also very important. So that's open communication and respect. Anu, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this slide before I pass it over to you?
I think a lot of the things I'll probably speak about in the next slide when it comes to other stakeholders, there's a lot of similarities in terms of how you need to navigate those difficult conversations. So navigating client conversations. So we've got the word client on this stage here, but really this is talking about any stakeholders, any interested and affected parties that you may have interactions with, both internal to the government, but also external to the government as well. So, in my experience, these tend to be more about differences and personal and professional values that individuals have when they're working on a project together. Perhaps there's different working members that are responsible for different mandates. Everyone's got the same goal, but the approach is a little bit different. In these instances, it's most helpful to understand where assumptions have been made about the words that are used, the concepts that are there, and to help understand where there's discordance or misunderstandings. I had a really fantastic DG earlier in my career, and it was in a health department, so there were patients in the room and there was industry in the room. And he would kick off these divisive meetings by saying, what can we all agree on? And he made sure that everyone agreed because at least we had something to work towards together. So navigating these conversations with clients requires to set expectations. It requires you to handle some feedback. Sometimes when stakeholders are speaking with you, again, this is about being curious and not defensive. And Sam mentioned that in the last conversation with colleagues. It's difficult to deliver bad news as well. And I'm sure for those of you who've been in a room for bad news conversations, there's a lot of emotions at play. And so when you're thinking about navigating some of the more difficult conversations, think about your emotional intelligence. You don't know necessarily a lot about what theirs might be, but you can also understand maybe and anticipate some of their explicit or implicit needs. And stay really solutions focused and tap into your empathy about what they might be experiencing in that moment, because you're not just addressing them, you're also a representative of the public service. And so that's pretty loaded with, what does that mean and who are you as a representative? So you might want to keep some of those thoughts in mind as well. Just looking at the time, and we're going to have to move on to invite to Katty to come into the room and provide her contributions from her area of expertise, which is clinical psychology. So with that, I'll bring Dr. Katty in and over to you.
Thank you so much. What a privilege to be with all of you, and I'm able to see 877 participants. This is glowing and so exciting. What a rich conversation, talking about trust, about growth, and about effective communications, because all of those together ultimately will lead to healthy relationships. Healthy relationships, not only in the workplace, but also in our personal life as well. And I always say to everyone that, you know what, life is about relationship. Everything really matters. And all of those strategies, we are very, very much hoping that, and studies do support, that they will ultimately lead to overall life satisfaction, definitely satisfaction in the workplace, and contribute to our overall health. And when we talk about health, health is health, whether we are talking about our mental health, our social health, and our physical health. So just to further our conversation here, again, in regards to growth and effective communication, and you also mentioned emotional intelligence, and so such a key features and variables here for us to appreciate. I would like to further extend by us talking about self-compassion, self-efficacy, and also how to set what we call SMART goals, because all of those strategies can again enhance this effective communication, conversation, and relationships, and our performance and productivity and happiness in the workplace. So first of all, self-compassion, it's really around treating myself with kindness, understanding acceptance, especially during difficult times, during times that I think that, wow, it's not working well. I think that I have failed. And this concept is rooted in mindfulness and emotional resilience. There are some key features within self-compassion. The first one is self-kindness. Self-kindness versus self-judgment. So it involves treating myself with warmth and understanding and self-care during, again, difficult times, rather than me being overly self-critical or harsh. So for example, instead of thinking, I failed again, I'm so bad at this, I'm going to say to myself, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm learning and growing through this experience. So very important here for us every single day to focus on our self-kindness. The second feature of self-compassion is the common humanity versus isolation. So here, recognizing that the challenges and the suffering are part of the shared human experience, rather than me feeling that I'm alone in my struggles. So a practical example is, let's say I'm facing a setback at work, and I want to remind myself that everyone faces obstacles at some point, and this is part of being human, and I'm not alone in this. And the third feature is mindfulness versus over-identification, which actually there were great examples of this right now. So it's really, I want to be mindful, meaning that I want to observe here my reactions, my thoughts, my emotions, so that I do not overly identify with my negative emotions and my negative thoughts. Self-awareness means also that I'm taking some distance here. I'm taking a pause so that I can appreciate and put my thoughts into perspective, regulate my emotions. So here, an example is that if I feel that I'm being overwhelmed here by stress, I want to take a moment here to acknowledge, take a time out, and acknowledging, yes, I'm feeling very anxious here right now, but without letting here the anxiety here define me, or not letting me make the healthy decisions. I want to take some time out, take some distance, and practice. It could be exercise, deep breathing. And once I feel that my emotions are and my thoughts are more in perspective, then I want to come back, and it's going to lead to a better here healthy decision making and action plan. Now, self-efficacy, which is super important here, is really around our belief in our ability to achieve goals, perform tasks, and overcome challenges. It's not about whether I have the skill or not, but it's the confidence in myself. And in fact, even when we talk about burnout, one of the features of burnout is the reduction in a sense of self-efficacy. It's when I feel that I don't feel confident I can do it anymore. I think I've been doing it for 10 years, 5 years, 30 years. I don't feel confident anymore. So self-efficacy, the confidence in myself is very important, the trust in myself. And there are some key strategies, proactive strategies for us to build every day, because everything we're discussing here is a dynamic process. So I want to build my self-efficacy. I want to set achievable goals. So I want to break down larger goals and objectives into smaller ones so that it's manageable. Without, again, judging myself. So I want to make it manageable. Either I break it down into 2 if it's still too hard, that's fine. I want to break it down into 10 or 100, doesn't matter. As long as every step here is achievable. And I always say to everyone, 1 is greater than a 0. And no one is here today out of magic. Everyone here today has worked so hard to be here where we are. So if again, learning a new skill, like whatever it is, computer or administration, communication, anything it is, I feel that, no, it is too hard. Let me again break it down, and then also seek support as well. The second point is how can I focus on mastery through practice, right? So the consistent effort and practicing, and that's, we know how it's best for us to build our confidence. So let's say my goal is to improve my public speaking. Let me work on rehearsing a short speech on my own. Then I want to make it with my trusted friends, etc., etc. I also want to work on visualizing myself doing it, etc. These are the type of graduated exposures we can take in. Reflecting on our past successes, right? What is it that I have done before, my previous achievements, that I'm proud of my capabilities? What is it that I did before that was also very hard? What are the great learning that I can take? Also, what is it that I did before in terms of what are the areas of further improvement that I want to take it here again for my learning? And we want to engage in, what we call positive, but it's not, it's more like a balanced self-talk. So really, I want to replace and reframe my negative thoughts into more encouraging affirmations to boost my confidence. So I have prepared for this. I have the skills to succeed. Very important, again, for us to engage in those healthy, proactive talk and learning from the setbacks, right? Treating failures as opportunities to grow. How can I refine here my approach rather than, again, putting myself down? So if I think that I miss a deadline, I want to reflect on a time when I turned this setback into a success. I want to reorganize my workflow. I want to seek support. I want to work on maybe a different problem-solving strategy, etc., etc. So always about, again, boosting our resiliency and our growth, which is the main topic here, our growth. When we talk about growth, we are talking about our professional growth, our emotional growth, our personal growth, our psychological growth. And finally, here quickly is about SMART goals, right? You might have heard it a lot. Again, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. SMART goals, SMART, super important. So I want to make sure that my goals here are very specific. For example, I want to advance my career. Rather than saying, okay, I want to advance my career, let me be more specific. I want to, be promoted for this position within my department. Okay, let me update my CV. Let me talk to someone. I want my goals to be measurable, that I can track my progress. I can determine what success looks like. So I will complete 3 training courses here. I want to make sure that I received the certification. Achievable. I want to make sure that the goal is realistic. And I'm focusing here on my current skills, on my current resources. So it's really making sure that it is attainable. So I will schedule monthly meetings here with my mentor, my supervisor, to discuss those strategies, etc., etc. And the last 2 here, I want to make sure that it is relevant, so that it is aligned with my broader career aspirations, and of course, the organizational objectives. So for example, I will enhance my proficiency in this data analytics tools. And of course, time bound. I want to make sure that I'm vigilant here for the deadlines. The deadlines are realistic here. And so let's say by December, yes, I want to make sure that I'm working on completing and presenting this project. So again, so much here to discuss, but I'm going to leave it here for my colleagues. Thank you.
Incredible. Thank you all so much. I have to give it to you. You are all a incredible and incredibly talented and knowledgeable group of panelists. So thank you so much for sharing your insights on all these topics. From Anu, everything that you touched on, from interpersonal relationships and learning opportunities, the fact that learning styles and even teaching styles, the two-way interactions was very knowledgeable. Thank you for sharing that about different approaches. Samantha, for touching on communications, the importance of clear communications and setting expectations as well. And then over to Dr. Ketty. Thank you for sharing your expertise from the clinical psychology side on the impact of mindfulness and what compassion and self-compassion can have in workplace performance. So thank you all for sharing on those sections. Now, we've reached the time for questions, which I think is absolutely great. We are working well on time because there are a lot of you, about over 800, and I'm sure we have a lot of great questions to ask our incredible speakers. So we'll move in to the Q&A function. Please remember that you can vote. You could write your questions and you could upvote the ones that you find that you like the most with a thumbs up, and we'll jump right in. So I'll be directing the questions to different panelists, but I invite any of the panelists to also jump in if you want to add your perspective or different approach. And I think we will start with Samantha. And the first question how can I prepare for a difficult conversation with my manager without feeling too nervous?
Okay, thank you, Antonia. This
No
is
problem.
a good question, and honestly, it is hard. I think the first thing is to recognize that it's valid to feel nervous. It's natural to feel nervous. That's okay. Once you recognize that, I think the next step for me would be reframing my mindset on the situation. So instead of seeing it as this daunting confrontation that you have to do, look at it as an opportunity of an exchange with your manager where you can show your skill set, you can demonstrate your care for your work and the values that you have. A good manager will want to support you and will want to encourage open communication and will want to hear your feedback. So on the other hand of that, be ready to hear feedback as well and be able to adapt and collaborate. After doing that, I would prepare and practice. If you're nervous, it's good to go over that. Maybe you have some points you want to make sure you get across. So writing those out beforehand, practicing it, grabbing a trusted, objective person to practice with as well. If it's maybe a sensitive topic or something really difficult, it might be good to get that outside objective perspective so that you can maybe ask how it's going to be interpreted. Maybe if it's charged, they can help you find a way to say it a little more gently on your side and taking the emotion out of it as much as possible. And finally, I would just say positive tone, keeping the I statements, and finding ways to show your intention and your care in the way that you're speaking, and being open for feedback and collaboration. But nerves are normal. It's okay. There's things you can do, and you can practice to overcome that.
Thank you for that. Dr. Ketty or Anu, would you like to add your perspectives to this? Or I could ask you a direct question as well.
Sure. I think you have to be realistic. I think I've had some difficult conversations where with my manager, with ADMs, with DMs, and with the ombuds person. And those conversations make me sick to my stomach. And you just have to recognize that your body is going to physiologically react in very predictable ways to stress. So managing those and the ways that you know yourself to do, or the advice that Ketty had earlier about, breathing and being mindful. But just know that you can't anticipate every permutation of what's going to come. But what you can do is to keep focused on your desired outcome. And you can think about the different arguments that you might have to present your opinion or to have that difficult conversation, so that you're really on goal and that it doesn't devolve into something that is unproductive and toxic. To preface everything that we talk about today, there's as much as you can do as an individual, but really half of the equation is that manager that you're talking to and what their capacity is to handle people management issues. And so, that's a wild card, and we all have different relationships. We all are different humans. My anecdote about Mina Ballantyne really does reflect that there's all kinds of people. That means there's all kinds of mindset, all kinds of values, all kinds of behaviors. Diversity is our strength, but it means that we kind of have to give grace and be graceful as well.
No, absolutely. And just to ask Anu, you mentioned you're talking about feedback and to avoid, but what would you say, how can someone give feedback to a coworker or manager, because it could be at both levels, without damaging or avoiding getting to a point of damaging a working relationship?
So, I mean, that's a great question. I have absolutely damaged relationships in the past. I have also had very, very productive and even better relationships because of honest conversations. And it's really depended on, whether this conversation is for a common goal and a common productive goal. The outcome of a project, fostering better communication relationship because you're both committed to something, finding something to agree to that is valuable, so that there's a reason to keep going and keeping collaborating together. And sometimes it's a deterioration that is too far gone, because we're all human. And how do you save that? I personally would rather be honest, and be honest about how it affects me professionally or personally. I think people need to understand the impact of what they say and what they do. We don't always realize it. But to also understand and take accountability for my own self and how I contributed to a conversation, and owning up to that, I think is important, and doing it without any expectation. You can say your piece, and then you have to be okay with that, because you can't control how someone's going to react or what their capacity is to handle a conversation. So knowing when to extract yourself and say, I'm too activated, this isn't productive, we're going around in circles, and being able to say, you know what, let's just take a break, or let's take this up later, or I need to digest this further. Maybe we can round out later. But finding ways to protect yourself, I think, is really important as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anu, for sharing that. So we talked a little bit, you shared a little bit about giving feedback. Now for Dr. Ketty, I'd like to ask you about receiving. So what's the best way to handle tough feedback about my performance without taking it personally?
This is so important, right? It's again, as I think everything that we have talked about, how we interpret events and how we perceive them can have a direct impact on our reactions, on our emotions and physical reactions, and then also what we decide to do or not do. But if we are able to see it as an opportunity here for growth and moving forward, it's not, if I see it, let's say, it's going to be a personal attack, it's going to be very difficult for me to even, being able to regulate my emotions and move forward. But if I interpret it as, let me learn from this, and maybe also this feedback, it is constructive and it helps me to grow, to even optimize my strength, whatever I'm good, I can even optimize it. And the areas here of further improvement, then of course I can further optimize it, so that then again, I can follow some of my other aspirations and so on. So if we are able to look at it from an opportunity lens, from a growth lens, rather than this is about me, this person does not like me, the person is mad at me, or it's a personal attack and so on, again, all of that healthy proactive interpretation can help us to move forward. Part of that is also to seek clarification as well if we're not able to understand. And being factual very much helps, right? So the person might say, yes, this project was very great, but there were mistakes and so on, right? So, oh, okay, what were they, so that I can learn? So I want to take back. I want to be able to write those things down, right? So that what is it that I can do it differently? Then I can also ask for support, right? If you get a feedback and you know in your mind that you actually know how to do it, that's great. But if you're not sure, it's like, oh, thank you. Then can I maybe do it and next time show you my draft? Or can I get further assistance and resources and so on, right? I have done that throughout my career, actually, where even as part of training here, I mean, again, my background is as a clinical psychologist. A lot of it is based on supervision and learning and learning and learning. And I always wanted to learn. I'm like, no, I need to know. I need to know what are the good parts, but what are the areas that I want to improve? And I would take the notes and I would want people see it and seeking support and consulting and so on.
Can I,
Incredible. Thank you. Oh, yeah, Anu?
Antonia, can I give another example of like another kind of feedback kind of conversation that can be difficult? And I'm thinking about, I'm in the policy space by and large, and so sometimes it's about a difference of opinion, or the full picture isn't appreciated because, the subject matter expert and the management have a different amount of information that they're able to digest. And so when the decisions are made, understanding decision making, I find, has been an area where it can be a challenging conversation. And whether it be about the political influence, financial constraints, policy direction, whole of government approaches, there's all these factors. And sometimes it's not about feedback, and sometimes it's about providing that feedback to say, help me understand better, because there's still some gaps. I need to connect the dots. I'm not seeing the system. And and curiosity can do a lot to manage difficult situations, because that means you're not judging the other person and you're not promoting your own position either. So being really careful with how you ask those open-ended questions can help to address some of the negativity or the challenge, but paving a way where you can work together instead of being in opposition.
I see. No, thank you for sharing that perspective, and for Dr. Kathy and yourself to kind of give that duality in both of your experiences on the same issue. I think that just shows the diversity of, we could all have the same issues underlying what we're working with, but depending on all these different factors, we can go at it in a different way. So I'd like to move the conversation a bit into early career. So Samantha, I have a question for you. How can I feel more confident speaking up in challenging situations, especially early in my career if I'm new? I'm new to the public service and keen and eager and unsure what to do.
I love that question. Thank you. So, this is something I've personally struggled with. And, I've joined here today with some incredible panelists, and I feel so lucky to be here sharing this space. And it can be hard and intimidating if you're early on in your career and you're working with team members, colleagues, whoever it may be, who has a lot of experience and knowledge. Anu and I actually had a great chat last night that comes to mind for this question. She mentioned comfort and credibility. And this comes with time and experience. And everyone has to start somewhere. I think we talked about that earlier on in this session. You're not alone in that. If you're feeling nervous, that's natural. You have to have trust and confidence in yourself to take little risks and step out of your comfort zone a little bit and try it. And maybe the people that you're sitting around a table with and inspired by, and it feels like they have all the right answers, at some point they did it and they were feeling just like you are. So I would say trust that you have a seat at the table for a reason, whatever project you're working on, whatever you're doing. Yeah, be confident in that you've been selected and somebody believed in you, and you have to believe in yourself too. And it starts by taking little risks and making mistakes too, and being able to be open to that feedback, learning from it, and just moving on to the next step. I'd also say too that for me personally, I found when I first started in the public service, I never wanted to speak up. I was in these positions that I just felt so nervous and so intimidated. But through my role with the Federal Youth Network and being co-chair of GovernX, I got to really work on my leadership skills and work on skills that I wasn't necessarily getting to work on in my day-to-day job. So volunteering and finding like-minded people that you can really be inspired by and work with to really nurture those skills that you want to lean into and build that confidence. I definitely recommend doing that in that space and then trying to implement that into your day-to-day work as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like I myself, as well as a new public servant like you, feel that and working with youth. But we often, I feel that's it. Take ownership of what you've done that has brought you here. Look around you to learn more, be open to it. And I would also say that, we do look to students as well. We look to a lot of the students on our workforce to hear about the skills that they're bringing in at that new level and the knowledge being shared. So don't feel what's it called? Imposter syndrome. It's not a thing. It should not be a thing. So, Anu?
Can I add in 2 cents from so I've got 20 years in the public service, so I'm not young, but I'm not super old and entrenched and curmudgeonly quite yet. But I will say that there's a lot of entrenched ways of thinking and doing in public service. And for anyone that's coming in that's less than 5 years in the government, you have a great perspective. And it's needed because it is more reflective of what is current. And it provides and it requires people like me and people in more senior positions to justify their entrenched positions given the current body of evidence. And so don't be afraid to question whether or not things should just keep going the way that they are, because we're always talking about innovation and it really is needed. And your minds are there because, as Sam and Antonia have said, because you're meant to be at the table. Someone thinks that you're important enough to do it, and that's what you're here for.
Absolutely. So oh, yes, Dr.
And
Kathy?
just very, very quickly, I would lump everything here under the umbrella of self-efficacy. That's exactly how we build our sense of self and self-efficacy and the confidence and trust in our capabilities. Yes, you want to be surrounded with the people that are, consistent with your values and your goals and your aspirations, short-term and long-term.
Well, absolutely. And thanks for adding that piece. So on that and the goals and aspirations, Dr. Kathy, what would you say is the best way to start a conversation specifically about career growth or promotion?
So we mean by, like, let's say with a supervisor, with a manager, right? So, okay. So here again, what I find very helpful is to always maybe make a list of my achievements, right? So I participated in this project from this and that. So you want to make a list of your achievements, list of any, great feedback you have received, of recognitions, and what you have accomplished. So it's very important to always have those factual information. And then about sharing here, what are your goals? Your goals, especially also if you feel that they are consistent with the department's objectives and the department's values and goals and so on, right? It goes always helpful to find common ground that we are all moving forward, right, towards the same goals and values and objectives. So start here by making sure you have a great list of your recognitions and achievements and so on, and very much consistent with that, how I would like to be able to further contribute. It would be either I would like to be able to contribute to this project because it's very much aligned with what I would like to do. I have already done project A and B. It's very close by, and I think it will be further growth in that regard. Or it could be that there is this other assignment that I have seen, this opportunity. So very much linking it with what I have done so far, with what I want to move forward, but then also how it's helpful for the entire team, essentially, that we all moving and we all experiencing that growth.
Thank you for that. So I'd also like a hot topic, and I guess top of our most voted list is a question about how to approach, and I guess it's a question about change and change that we're experiencing now in the public service, and changes and uncertainties around and changes the changes that might come. So a question I guess goes to all of you. So whoever would like to share your perspective for the current landscape with different, I guess, workforce adjustments and changes in employment, and so on. How do you approach your manager about asking if there will be changes, cuts, workforce adjustments within your team, and if they can support you or if they are aware of any other opportunities within?
That's a good question. So I would say the first thing as a public servant is to really understand politically what's happening right now. What does it mean when government's prorogued? What does it mean? What does it mean for appropriations to ensure that programming continues through main estimates, subs A, B, and C? If these are foreign concepts to you, DM me. Really understand what needs to happen in order for management to be sure. And if you can't find those answers and your manager doesn't fully understand, then talk to your parliamentary affairs coordinators, because someone will be able to help you understand politically what's going on, because you can ask those questions, but you're not going to necessarily get answers until the system kind of works itself out. And it's a big enough system and it's a transparent enough system that you can anticipate what will happen on March 24th, on March 9th, and what would happen afterwards, and especially around appropriations. Having that difficult conversation with your manager can be informed by the realities, because they're probably in the same situation as you are, and they're going to have the same concerns that you are. So having that open conversation is important. In terms of finding elsewhere else in the government's hiring, that's the secret sauce that everyone wants to know. And the secret sauce, honestly, is that it can happen anytime, anywhere. But that list of main estimates tells you which programs are actually going to be funded sooner, or not main estimates, but the sub C and sub B and sub A. That gives you an indication of kind of where is going to be hiring. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the reality politically. It is a very difficult time. If you haven't had a briefing from PCO, ask for briefings. And so I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely a time of change. So any change management tips are also always appreciated. Sam, sorry. I'd like to ask you a question. How, as a newer, I guess, as a junior employee, how can someone say no to additional workload as a junior employee if it is beyond their role without feeling like they're losing or missing out on an opportunity?
It's a good question. And again, honestly, something that I personally have struggled with and have had to try to work on, maybe not biting off more than you can chew or burning the candle on both ends. I feel like I tend to be someone who wants to raise my hand and sign up for as much as I can to grow. And it's like a slow and steady can win the race, maybe keeping that in mind and knowing that there will probably be other opportunities. If I were to go into a conversation with my manager, I would probably start by acknowledging the situation and how, I'm really passionate about this and I would love to do it, but I want to be able to show up and be fully present for the things that are currently on my plate. And I'm a little concerned that maybe if I'm adding more, I might be spread a little bit too thin, or finding ways to really spin it in a positive way and show that you do care and you want to grow and you don't want to give up on this opportunity, but that the work you're doing at the moment and that you currently have on your list is also equally important and deserves time and attention as well. So it's a tough situation, and I think it's something not only in the workplace but in our personal lives that I'm sure we all struggle with too, and just having a struggle of overcommitting and wanting to show up in the best way possible.
Wonderful. Thank you for that perspective. I have one more question for Anu and Dr. Kati, and then we'll move to closing. Um, Anu, as someone who's experienced a breadth of different opportunities and roles and potentially met different managers, if how do you communicate if you've experienced dissatisfaction in management that might be unsupportive of your development or blocking you from taking certain assignments or opportunities?
Oh, that's happened. That's happened more than on more than one occasion. Things have gotten personal and nasty in comments that have been made to me. Um, and I have spoken with my exit. I have tried to have exit interviews. I haven't always had exit interviews. If any of my previous managers are watching this, I'm sure that just know that I'm emotionally activated still. It's still traumatic. So how can you provide how can you say your dissatisfaction? I have done it in relation to the work that I've done. So policy development, program design, and explained why where I was dissatisfied, where I thought I had not been heard. I have spoken that truth to power on more than one occasion. I sleep at night. Um, has it been good for my career? Not necessarily. Uh, but your reputation does follow you. And I have been offered more opportunities because of my reputation to have integrity and to speak truth to power, to provide my very best and honest advice. And that's something that I have a reputation for, that I would rather have a reputation for that than to simply uh, doing the checkbox exercise that makes me feel icky inside because I think that it is unethical and not aligned with public service values based on what we have said about diversity, inclusion, respect, transparency, openness, and the other core government values that the DM task force is looking at. So, I think at the end of the day, when I've left positions because of a racism situation, because of harassment, because of bullying, when these are things that have happened, I have made good and sure to notify superiors all the way up to DMs, because it's unacceptable. And at the end of the day, it impacts public policy and what we do and providing the services that Canadians need, providing the thoughtfulness that Canadians need. So that's how I'm able to sleep at night.
Wonderful. Thank you. We are almost at the hour, but I did want to quickly hear from Dr. Kati about two quick tips, three quick tips and insight about how to ask for time if you need your time to reply to responding in a situation. How would you approach that?
So in what context, let's say, so I need to take my time to respond. So let's say in a meeting, someone says something and I'm thinking about it through, or let's say in a writing email context, do we know which one or?
In a conversation.
Okay, so let's say I'm in a conversation. So again, everything, it depends on the context and it's very much, it could be individualized. But again, if I think that emotionally I feel regulated, I feel good, then we know in our thinking, we are able to put everything into perspective. I'm able to think with more clarity. And however, if I think the conversation is becoming more heated and emotionally I feel very upset to the point where I think that it might cloud my judgment, or I might be saying certain things or not saying certain things that might not be working here, then of course timeout could be very helpful. Sometimes mental timeout can be helpful, like including, let's say, grounding technique. First of all, this is a great question. What I would do also is really around applying those skills throughout the day before even leave and I attend a meeting, especially if I know ahead of time this might be a difficult meeting. But grounding technique, again, it's about how can I use my senses to ground myself to the moment and the present time in terms of what do I see, hear, my body touches, and the sense of smell and taste. So while I'm actually in the situation, I want to ground myself to the moment and the present time, but then also staying here true to my goals and an objective. But if I see that, no, I need to engage in my physical timeout, very kindly, I would say thank you so much for this meeting. May I be able to take a pause here and for us to reconvene, and I would be very grateful, right? So this could be an example if I know that I'm going to need a physical timeout.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask all of you one last question, but we have reached time and a bit beyond. So thank you for those who have stayed with us. We will do the wrap up right now. But it just goes to show this topic has been very, very engaging for everyone. So definitely something we can go on and on about, but we will end the session here. So thank you to the speakers for providing your valuable insights and different perspectives. I know I learned a lot. We do have a poll that was just sent up for everyone. Was this session a good use of your time? Please input for our team. Take a quick moment and submit the poll. And they'll close it shortly. If you want to know more about any of these topics and upcoming sessions with Career Bootcamp, you can check out the wiki resource page. As well, thank you so much for joining us today. That concludes our session for day 2. Be sure to join us on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for another exciting day of Career Bootcamp. The link to all the sessions will be included, as well as the networking event can be found on the Zoom events main page. And resources will be available on the wiki page and the recording of this event on the YouTube channel. So thank you all so much for joining us and staying on, and have a great day.